一星期已過，又到咗離地新聞嘅時間啦。大家好，我係 Titus。今日咧，我哋有一個嘉賓嘅，佢叫Memet Tohti。My pronunciation is right 嚇。佢係全球維吾爾人大會加拿大代表。咁我哋今日嘅節目咧，會主要咧係用英文進行嘅。咁樣咧就呢一個subtitle 咧，會喺24小時之內咧就會放上去㗎啦。咁thank you for coming first of all.
You're welcome.
Yeah. First of all, I just this weekend, actually, 17 medias in the world just released the so-called China cable, talking about the East Turkestan, the re-education camp in East Turkestan region, and it's pretty detailed. That include a memo and 4 bulletins talking about how to build up the camp as well, how to control the people. I would love to ask the first question is from the fact that the document leaks, what do you see in terms of the Communist Party and the government control of the region? First of all.
Yes, thank you. Before start, let me send my congratulations to our friends in Hong Kong. It is a big victory for democracy. Mm-hmm. And thanks for brave people there who are fighting for their freedom and the rights. That is a big encouragement for all others. Mm-hmm. And coming to your question, yes, this weekend the world woke up with 2 big news. One is the election in Hong Kong, and the second is the leakage of top secret, the Chinese government's state information about controlling the entire population, Uyghur population in East Turkestan that China calls as Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region since 1955. The significance of this leakage is, number one, it is systematic, carefully planned, and with the sophistication, with all details, and implemented by all state powers. Mm-hmm. What I mean by state powers, including judiciary, including all organs of Communist Party, security apparatus, and the population, propaganda, everything combined. Mm-hmm. And so from these documents, we can see 2 significant methods of controlling entire population. One is the conventional method, which is man-to-man control, with the human element, security element, installing cameras and this and that. Another one is digital control, mental control. And if you look at those leaked documents, you can see the harsh words just directly referred to the President Xi Jinping, such as show no mercy, detained as many as possible, wash their brain and cleanse their hearts. These are the harsh words. And what does it mean to ordinarily people in the street of East Turkestan for Uyghurs, and what does it mean to those who are implementing these policies? It is a draconian policy. It is fascistic policy. It is chauvinistic policy. Because the central government kept this policy or security measures so wide open, and it is up to those local officials how to interpret it. So that's the reason we see millions of people incarcerated in the camps without any limits. And we've seen millions of children separated from their parents. And we've seen unknown number of deaths. In fact, just today I received one news. One of my university classmates, who is 53 years old, his dead body came out from the concentration camps. And so he was a brilliant man, and he was educated in physics. He didn't need any education, as China claims. And I don't know, for example, my mother, who is 78 years old woman, just ordinarily woman, and she didn't need any education. And my 38 direct relatives, some of them farmers and some of them teachers, they finished the government mandated schools, and they are well qualified for teaching, and they didn't need any education. So-called education is the cover to conceal the exact situation of the Uyghurs. If you look at those memos and operating manuals, it is so detailed. And local guardians and security officers are required to monitor their activities minute by minute, even how long time they spend in washroom. They are not; those detainees not allowed to talk. Those detainees totally isolated from outside. They are not allowed to contact with their family members, and how much food they eat and how much time they spend outside, and how the doors are installed, double locked doors, for example. It is so detailed. So if you look at those memos and operating manuals, it looks like more prison than any other place. Even it is much worse than detention centers. It is more than prison. And it doesn't look like it is school. And because in school, you don't need to have double locked doors.
No.
You don't need to install security cameras with zero blind spot. You don't need to monitor people's mood and activities and how long time they spend in washroom, kind of. So this actually, the leaked document, the one thing this document did is to connect the dots directly to central government or President Xi Jinping. So Xi Jinping is the one who are responsible for this brutality.
So does that mean this document in line with the testimony? Because about the re-education camp, actually it's being reported for several times last 2 years already, including testimony, including satellite images or something like that. Does the document in line with those testimony and the satellite image?
Actually, this leaked documents are important for many who are not aware of the situation. It is not new for Uyghurs, for example. We knew this thing going on since a number of years. For example, when my communication was cut off completely from my mother in October 2016, I knew that something very bad going on there. Because since then, just imagine, as a son, I couldn't able to communicate with my mother. I could not able to call to my mother. I couldn't ask, how are you? Very simple greetings. And I couldn't text her. I couldn't send my photos just to console her. Okay, I'm all right. So since then, one after another, all Uyghurs living abroad, they lost contact with their family members. And the government mandated the local communication companies and the local officials just to install a software, government-mandated software to each and every cell phone of Uyghurs. Why? Just they have to monitor their activities and how much money they spend, which way they enter the house, from back doors or front doors, and whom they are communicating, associating with, and what kind of food they prefer, what kind of culture or a song, or what kind of daily language they use, everything. And so initially it started in this way, the cut off communication, and followed up with the arrest of prominent Uyghur scholars, professors, university teachers, doctors, soccer players, singers, public speakers. What the hell going on? If it is the education camp, then what those people have to do in the education camp? Because they are PhD. They are the one who's supposed to provide education to others. And so even this document is so detailed, but it is the very small part of the huge iceberg. because this document doesn't tell anything about the crematoria that Chinese government built alongside with the concentration camps. And this document doesn't tell how many people been arrested. This document doesn't tell how many children already separated from their parents and put in separate children's concentration camp or give adaptation to some other people or scattered to mainland China. And this document doesn't tell how many already died in the concentration camps. This document doesn't tell what kind of medication that Chinese government are imposing to each detainees, because from the eyewitness testimonies we know that Chinese government are giving unknown medication to each detainees every day.
Are you implying that they are using Uyghurs as kind of a medical testing or something?
Everything could happen, because unless Chinese government come clean and allow the international investigators just to do the job, lab job, and this is only we can assume, but from it is not from one or two eyewitness account. More than 5 eyewitness accounts testified in the same way at the U.S. Congress or some other places. So, and in fact, now we have a separate funding. We collected enough fund to do a medical check for those escaped detainees, what kind of medication Chinese government injected in their body. So it is the ongoing process. And also this document doesn't tell us how many Uyghurs already transferred from East Turkestan to mainland China and scattered in different provinces and different prisons. So even though this document linked the brutality on the ground directly to central government or Xi Jinping, so it is important.
So it's kind of like giving the reason of what happened inside there.
Yeah, and also the many international the people around the world, or some scholars or some politicians, they have kind of skepticism. Come on, it's impossible. This is 21st century.
Yeah.
We already concluded from the past history that never again should happen this kind of atrocity. This document shows that never again is just happening right before our eyes, watchful eyes of international community. So this document is so important.
You also mentioned about the scattering the Uyghurs into mainland China, the other part of mainland China. You probably know in March we interviewed a Tibetan activist, Chimilamo. She's also talked about putting in Han Chinese into Tibetan region to dilute the Tibetan population. So what you said also implied that such a policy is also happening in East Turkestan region as well. Is it right?
Yeah, it is, because if you look at the Chinese constitution, China said, okay, we are multinational, or the state with we allow other nationalities just flourish with their cultures and this and that. If you look at the People's Congress, and there are more than 56 so-called ethnic minorities with their traditional attires, just to attend that Congress for showcase, it means there are some other nationalities exist in China. In fact, China's constitution says so. But in Chinese expansion since past number of centuries, based on land expansion, not only the land expansion, by assimilating others. For example, last century at this time, the Manchus are quite strong in world stage. Right now, we don't hear about them. Disappeared, assimilated to Han Chinese society. Now, after the 1949 Chinese Communist Party sent the military troop to East Turkestan and Tibet, initially in order to get along with the local minorities, they showed their beautiful face. They showed their helping hand, just sweeping the backyard of the local people and bringing water and just kind of, okay, we came here just to help you. And then cultural revolution started, and then all Uyghur tradition and ethnic tradition are gone. After the 1979 so-called third Chinese Communist government's third National Congress or something, they adopted open up policy. And in 1979 to 1989, 10 years, there was certain degree of autonomy existed. I was at school at that time. And the Chinese leaders also concluded that, okay, we didn't do anything good for those people, Uyghurs and Tibetans, so we have to withdraw the Chinese and the Chinese troops from those areas. And it was Hu Yaobang, Chinese Communist Party secretary. Then he suddenly died. And then Tiananmen massacre happened. And then Soviet Union collapsed. After that, Chinese government started to scare. Okay, if we allow those people the autonomy that granted under Chinese constitution, so they are going to go away. And so they left those constitutionally granted autonomous right on the paper only, and they implemented totally opposite policy that undermining the regional autonomy and the cultural diversity, that kind of thing. So what this document shows, not only in line with the actual the policy practice of the Chinese government, actually it shows that it is the determination of the Chinese government not allow different cultures to exist. Instead, why you are washing the brain of others? Why you are cleansing the heart of others? You have to take whatever existed in their mind out and put something else. So that's the definition of the brainwashing. So number of eyewitnesses and secret documents of the Chinese governments already stated that brainwashing is number one priority. So basically, that's why the Chinese government enforcing or forcing people to denounce their ethnic and religious identity. Give up their ethnic and the religious affinity. Just adopt the Han Chinese way of life, or adopt the Communist Party as their god to worship. And that's the reason mosques are demolished, churches are demolished, and Xi Jinping's portrait just put on the churches or mosques, and the cemeteries and the centuries old cities, and the tradition and the language, everything on hold, put permanent ban. So why the Chinese government doing it? Just it is kind of ethnic cleansing, to clean up the existing national identity and inject the Communist Party approved communist identity to them. So not only identical, now this policy definitely fits the definition of the ethnic cleansing.
Okay, let me read you something. One of the 17 media is the Guardian in Great Britain. They asked the Chinese embassy in there to respond. This is part of the response. It said, Singjai is a beautiful, peaceful, and prosperous region in China. 3 years ago, this was not the case. That become a battleground. Thousands of terrorist incidents happened in between 1996 and 2016, and thousands of innocent people got killed. So they go on saying that, okay, we just implement this policy just to crush the terrorist activities. They also describe that they teach Mandarin to the so-called trainee is to help them to get a job, because it is the common language in mainland China. So what do you think about this reaction?
That is the rhetoric that Chinese government uses as a chewing gum all the time. And if it is the place where terrorist activity is so common, if you look at the official Chinese statements before the September 11th, just a couple of weeks ago, they said, we don't have any terrorism. That is the official line of the Chinese government's the narrative. And then after the September 11th happened in New York, and the Chinese government jumped into it and and said we are the victim of terrorism. Okay, so if there is a terrorism, then why 3 million people in concentration camps? If it is the terrorism, then why Uyghur children are separated from their parents? If it is the terrorism, why Chinese government just give us a detail when and what happened and who did it and how many people died? Just give us some details instead of using a vague language and with just brushing everything in one paint. Right? So if you look at the Chinese official statement, number one is fake news, just as the UK Chinese ambassador in UK said, and also terrorism. Okay, if it is the terrorism, then do you have to lock up entire population in concentration camp?
It is punishing the whole ethnic group, actually.
Yeah, it is against your anti-terror law. It is against your constitution. It is against your constitution and an ethnic regional autonomous law and also criminal code of China. It runs against everything that China put on the constitution. So if there is a terrorism, unfortunately it happens everywhere, there is a way of combating against it. You don't have to put the entire population into concentration camp. You don't have to separate the children and the parents. And you don't have to cut communication from outside world. You don't have to hide those camps. And if you remember, initially when this concentration camp thing started to emerge on the international media, especially last year, August, at the UN, Chinese government's reaction was flatly denied. We don't have such a thing exist. And then partly accepted. And then now the defense line is we are fighting against terrorism. Come on. The Uyghurs, if you look at the official Chinese narrative, very nice people, love to dance, love to sing, and Xinjiang is a beautiful place. Even China produced the song, Xinjiang 是好地方. So what happened? What happened? Right? And if you look at the birth and the death rate, according to Adrian Zhang, the death rate of Uyghurs just plunged. And the birth rate is plunged, death rate is up. So what happened? And the Chinese government, if there is a terrorism, Chinese government transferred millions of Han Chinese to the region. So what happened? So there are a lot of questions than answers. And the Chinese government, unfortunately, instead of defending this defenseless, and they came up with the vague and the rhetoric, basically saying that the terrorism and the fake news and the kind of the empty words without any concrete details in it. So I think international community did not buy it, but Chinese government is not bothered just to repeat the same thing again and again.
Okay, we have around 5 more minutes until our part 1 is end. So I just ask you a very short question. One of our co-hosts, Gloria Fong, she also mentioned that there are a lot of Uyghur youth is jobless.
Yeah.
And that is why the communist government, they said they are not re-education center. They are vocational occupation training center, things like that. Is it actually, I think you mentioned that they are actually very high educated, the Uyghurs are very high educated. Is it like there are kind of a 2-tier system when the Han Chinese comes into the East Turkestan, or we call it Singjai, and get all the good jobs, and then they are being pushed out or things like that? Does such thing exist in East Turkestan?
Of course, definitely. And just if you remember, the Professor Ilham Tohti wrote the letter to Chinese president at that time, just asking the central government to intervene the local policy in autonomous region. He raised one example, said in Urumqi city, the capital of East Turkestan or Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, so-called, there were 6,000 taxi driver license issued. Among those 6,000, only 300 issued to Uyghurs. And Ilham Tohti said, okay, there are all university graduates are jobless among Uyghurs. At least Uyghurs Do you know English? Do you know Chinese? Do you know Uyghur language? And many people are coming from Central Asia. The Uyghur people can understand them. At least give this taxi license for those jobless, university-educated professionals so that they have a better chance to communicate with the people coming from neighboring countries. Mm-hmm. He's in jail right now. Mm-hmm. He did not advocate for anything or violence. He advocated the rights of Uyghur people guaranteed on Chinese constitution. Mm-hmm. And so if China said it is the Uyghurs are backward, this and that, who controls the education? It is the state. Mm-hmm. Then what have you done since 70 years of occupation? Mm-hmm. If there is a problem in education, you have to look at the mirror. Okay, I am controlling the education. Why I did not provide enough resources? Mm-hmm. Why I did not provide this education to them? Mm-hmm. It is not that those Uyghurs who didn't want the education, it is up to the central government to discriminate them from having a right education. And so that kind of argument does not hold a water. There's no base for that. And secondly, if you look at the outside world, Uyghurs are working today in White House. Uyghurs are working today in the NASA. Uyghurs are working today in various high-tech companies, well-reputable companies around the world. So Uyghurs are not stupid then. So it is up to the central government. So Chinese government's the policy has never been to emphasize the good education. Mm-hmm. Their policy is to leave the Uyghurs uneducated, so it is easier to control them. Mm-hmm. That's the reason they did not approve the funding request to open a publishing house for Uyghur books, because publishing house is controlled by the state. Mm-hmm. There's no independent publishing house in the region. So you are not giving the permission to a publishing house to publish the Uyghur books. You are forcing Uyghurs to learn ethnic Han Chinese. For Uyghurs, we are the nations in thousands of years. We have our unique culture and literature. We have created civilization, contribute to the world. And so what happened after the Communist Party took over in 1949 since then? Mm-hmm. It is your responsibility. So Chinese government's argument, as I said, does not hold water, and they have to ask that question instead of blaming Uyghurs.
Okay, so time is almost up for this part, and the next part we are going to go to the other part of the China cable, talking about being the Uyghurs outside of the East Turkestan being kidnapped into the region or get into those centers. So this is what we have of the part 1. So see you in part 2.
打邊爐最緊要係乜嘢？湯底？唔係。係牛肉。打邊爐最緊要係乜嘢？湯底？唔係，係牛肉。
好食嘅，好食嘅。